I'm going to be introducing our speaker, Wendy Keats. Hold your applause for now, but I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction. This is Wendy. Wendy's actually been involved in community economic development and social enterprise for nearly 35 years, although she swears she was only 4 when she started. She has been the executive director of the Cooperative Enterprise Council of New Brunswick since it was founded in 2007, and a private community economic development consultant since 1989. She has worked with more than 200 organizations and businesses with social, environmental, or cultural goals, helping them with everything from startup and incorporation through to governance, management, capitalization, and evaluation. Wendy is a certified mediator and served as a senior faculty member of UPEI's Center for Conflict Studies over a decade, where she specialized in preventing and resolving conflict through democratic processes, member engagement, and good governance. She was a co-founder of the Atlantic Council on Community and Social Enterprise and sits on numerous boards and committees related to CED, including the board of Canadian Community Economic Development Network, and the New Brunswick government's interdepartmental working group on social enterprise. Wendy has a special passion for youth engagement and renewable energy. She lives completely off the grid in Salisbury, where she tends a large organic garden, makes specialty twig furniture, and soaks in her wood-fired hot tub whenever the hectic world of community economic development allows it. So if you'll all join me in welcoming Wendy, thank you for coming.
So yes, you can all come for a soak in my wood-fired hot tub. Anybody attending this conference has a free invite. So I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here today. You know, a friend of mine once introduced me as a guest speaker by saying, Wendy is the master of the complex compound conjunctive sentence when she's passionate about something, which was a very nice way of saying I like to talk a lot about things that I'm passionate about. You know, when you put that together with a room full of dynamic, potentially social entrepreneurs, hopefully by the end of this event, that's what you'll be, is like a dream come true. So thank you very much for having me here today. I have to bring this microphone down. You know, my dad once said to me, I'm so short that I should have sued the government for building the roads too close to my butt. And this is always the case with the microphone. So I am here to talk to you a bit tonight about what's happening in the social enterprise world, particularly here in Atlantic Canada. I was really excited to see, as soon as I pulled into the parking lot, one of my dear friends and fellow co-founders of the Atlantic Council on Community and Social Enterprise, David Upton, who's going to be one of your panelists tonight. Listen very hard. This guy's like, he knows everything. When I want to know something, I just call David. So it's great to see him. But so David and I have been around this social enterprise sector for, I think, probably since it really began in the Maritimes. It's been a growing sector around the world. But you know what we're like in the Maritimes. We always like to wait till other people do it and make all the mistakes, and then we slowly come in and perfect it so that it's better than anywhere else in the world. So I just want to start, and by the way, technical stuff is not my forte. I just want to start with sort of this definition around social enterprise. And, you know, I can remember many of us sitting around the table having extensive conversations about this until one very wise social entrepreneur from PEI, David Doughton, said to us, you know, we could spend from now until eternity defining what social enterprise is. And so we stopped at that point here in Atlantic Canada and said, let's just do it and forget about really being, you know, having some clear, exact description of social enterprise. But generally speaking, this is sort of the rule that applies in most cases. And so the descriptions are generally around a not-for-profit, a for-profit, an organization or a business that, and a cooperative. God forbid I forgot cooperative. Here I am, the executive director of the Cooperative Enterprise Council, and a cooperative that generates revenue from the sale of goods or services in the marketplace and reinvests the majority of the profits back into some sort of a social, environmental, or cultural goal. And again, that could be disputed, and you will hear different definitions sometimes, but that there's not a licensing body, there's not a social enterprise police that are going to come down and say, if you only put 49% of your profits in, then you're not a social enterprise. You're out of the school, you're out of the club, man. But because it's an emerging sector, and as we'll talk about this evening, a real growing sector, there is a need to have some sort of a general understanding, and this is a definition that often applies. And I'll talk about that and what that means as we go along. So what makes them different is it's like they're a hybrid of the traditional not-for-profit sector and the traditional business model. They fit somewhere right there in the middle. So they have elements of both. So traditionally, the not-for-profit world has always been focused on meeting community needs, and they tended to do that through fundraising and donations and volunteerism and never charging for what they did. Always the idea that if you're a not-for-profit, if you're a charity, you got to do things for free because that's just the way it's supposed to be. What we know now is that's neither healthy. We wouldn't have our families living in poverty, but we don't mind having our not-for-profits living for poverty, and anybody that works for a not-for-profit could probably tell you about that. Fortunately, it's changing. On the other end of the scale, we had business, and business was all about meeting some sort of a customer want. That's the reason that they exist. If you look up the definition of a corporation, all you business students have probably done that. You know, the purpose of a corporation is to maximize profits for its shareholders. So it's about the money and it's about customer wants. So social enterprises blends those two things together so that the community needs or the community wants are still important, as is the social aspect of a social enterprise or not-for-profit, but they have to learn to work more like businesses. And they need to understand how business works. They need to work under the same fundamental principles and keeping in mind their mission and the reason that they exist. So if you were to, really look at what the difference is it's just around a business that operates for the purpose of some sort of a social or a community goal, to meet that goal. The other thing that's a bit unique about social enterprises is that they have a double or more often a triple bottom line. And so they're looking for a blended return on investment. And in the social enterprise world, the word money isn't evil, as you would often find in the not-for-profit world. It's looked at as a way to do good. So if you generate profit, then you should be able to do a few things. You should be able to pay your people well. You should be able to operate like any other business would. And then you should be able to generate enough profits that are being able to be put back, reinvested back into some sort of social good. And what's really interesting and really exciting is the emergence of the sector, especially among young people, just like yourselves. And Deloitte did a study recently with millennials, and in that study, 74% of them said that they felt business needed to be doing more than just having some sort of financial goal. And in particular, the areas that they were most concerned about were resource scarcity, climate change, and income inequality. And that particular survey also looked at how many of those millennials wanted to either work for a company or own a company that was based on a set of social enterprise values, and the numbers were somewhere around 60%. So I know in this room that there's about 60 of you at least that have some sort of a desire to make a difference in this world in what you do, rather than just making money. Yeah, money is great and people want to be comfortable. There's no question about that. Millennials aren't saying they want to, go back to days when they didn't have enough clothes on their back or food in their mouths or be able to afford to feed their families. But what they are saying is we can have both. And so you guys are the generation that's going to change all of this and really take sort of this infrastructure that's been built and move it forward. Another reason I'm really excited to be here. So just looking at sort of what do social enterprises do, and I've got a number of examples that I'm going to share with you this evening. But from a product perspective, they can do anything. They can make anything from patio chairs and meat pies straight through to medical marijuana. I thought I'd throw that one in there because I thought it would get your attention, first of all. But also because there was just a great story in the on CBC last week outside of Gagetown, our military base, where they're opening a social enterprise for veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's a safe place for them to be able to smoke marijuana to deal with the issues that they have. I thought it was kind of a great. There's also some, we call them grow-up co-ops that are beginning to emerge in that. And so their purpose is to provide a service and a product. So just to say, it can be anything really that you do with a social enterprise from a product perspective. And the same thing goes from a service perspective. There are so many examples in the service industry of everything from recycling through to housing. There's a lot of co-op housing you may be familiar with, some really innovative models of co-op housing emerging. Courier services, home care services. There's a wonderful home care social enterprise here in Halifax. I'm going to talk to you a little bit. And there's a lot of interest in food services, especially in local food, healthy food, natural food, those sorts of things. And just so many examples. And when I was trying to get a few examples ready for you for this evening's presentation, I got to tell them about that one. Oh, yeah, no, but I got to tell them about that one because there's just so much going on. So all I can do is touch on the tip of the iceberg of some of the things here. But I did bring some brochures and some more information that you can look at and check out our website, and we'll talk a bit about that as well. So from an outcomes perspective, so I talked about from a product perspective and from a service perspective. From an outcome perspective, social enterprises can address any number of community issues. So they can reduce poverty and unemployment by creating jobs and delivering training. And we did a survey recently, and I know David's company, Common Good Solutions, did the same survey in Nova Scotia on social enterprise. And I know that the findings in New Brunswick, I haven't had a chance to read David's yet, I just got it tonight. But the findings in New Brunswick were that about half of social enterprises employed and or offered training services to their client base. So those were often people that were living in poverty and marginalized communities, newcomers and immigrants, single parents, people with mental or intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities. And so they were creating amazing jobs. I'm going to speak to you a bit about the number of jobs that are created by them and the impact that they have. Providing accessible services. So there's tons of examples of them in housing and healthcare. And again, that's a field that's really growing. And I think one of the things that's so exciting about this is the innovation. And as I mentioned, to a large degree, it is the millennial population that is driving, especially some of the new stuff and the innovative stuff. So we're seeing things you're seeing all kinds of car share co-ops and, different healthcare, really innovative models in healthcare and housing, recreation, arts, and culture. So accessible services. Environmental issues, huge increase in the number of social enterprises that are addressing issues around recycling and alternative transportation and ecotourism and energy like windmills and solar and many other things. Again, integrating marginalized population into not just the business end of the community and working in a business, but also to the social fabric, and really having a major impact in terms of making people feel part of the community and actually be active contributors to the community. And this is social enterprise is a really wonderful way to get them into places that they maybe would not otherwise be able to go. And then last but not least, they are doing amazing work in stimulating economic revitalization. And there are a number of social enterprises that is their actual purpose. So an example would be the group that I work with, the Cooperative Enterprise Council of New Brunswick. And that's our job, is to stimulate economic activity, but based on a set of principles around social enterprise. And there are some other examples I'll talk about, like the CBDCs that provide loans, and social enterprises like Common Good Solutions that are just doing some tremendous things to advance the sector and build local economies. This is usually a very large part of the social enterprise sector is around keeping money in the community, keeping investment in the community, and building local business. As I mentioned, they're a real emerging force. They've really taken hold. I remember the day I was the executive director of a not-for-profit organization a number of years ago, and we used to get core funding. And a lot of the bigger not-for-profits at least got a bit of core funding. I remember the day when the government came to us and said, no, that's going to stop. You got to start acting more like businesses. And that wasn't easy to go from that mindset I mentioned earlier, where you were reliant on grants and donations and so on, to being business. And a lot of groups didn't have the capacity. They didn't have people on their boards or within their staff that were business people. They were often social workers and so on. And so there was a period of time when a number of them fell by the wayside. But the ones that survived and have begun to thrive because they have adjusted their thinking to this model of social enterprise. And so today, and this was a quick number because there's a lot of research that still needs to be done, and it's starting. And the last 2 or 3 years, we've been able to start doing social enterprise surveys. That's the one that I mentioned here, and the one we've done in New Brunswick, and it's being done. They're being done across the country. There's been a number of other sort of economic impact studies and research being done, but this is still new enough that it's hard to give you concrete data. But I can tell you that there are in the vicinity of 3,000 social enterprises in Atlantic Canada. And they employ tens of thousands. In New Brunswick, we did just a small study on co-ops, of which there were, they constituted somewhere around 20% of the social enterprise sector. And they generate $1.35 billion a year in annual revenues, and they employ 7,500 people. So if you extrapolate that, it gives you a sense of the kind of economic impact that they have in our communities. And in New Brunswick, just to give you an example, the average social enterprise actually employs the equivalent of 16.5 full-time people. So these aren't just small little nonprofits that are doing good. These are a real emerging force in the marketplace and in the economy. They generate billions in revenues, contribute billions to GDP. They're dynamic and they're innovative and they're changing all the time. And I think that part of that is because it's being driven a lot by young people. But not only, there's a lot of old folks like Dave and I that are in the business too. But you know, it tends to be people that have really got a passion for their communities and have been working for a long time in the communities, and they've seen the ways that things can be done differently, and they've just been waiting for the moment to be able to join together with young people and make some of these things happen. And so what is emerging is you see that the social enterprises are just very dynamic and very innovative, and so they're a very exciting place to work. And so again, it really excited me when I saw that Deloitte survey that said 74% of millennials feel that this is important, because if they feel it's important, then and the impetus is there, then we really have the potential, I think, to change the world. And I think that's what that 99% from the Occupy movement said they wanted. They want a different way of doing things, and this is the solution. Social enterprises are really focused on meeting a wide variety of interests, needs, and values. And so they can do anything. You can have Mountain Equipment Co-op is an amazing example of a social enterprise that's all about sports. And so like it can be anything. It can address any interest, any hobby, any community interest that you think is important. It can address any need that the community has. Again, there's nothing that a business can do that a social enterprise can't do. But it also can address people's values. And I'm not sure that you can find another business model that can claim that it can do all three, but it can. They're impactful. They make a difference in the community, and I'm going to just show you some examples of what some of those differences are. But, and again, there's not, it hasn't been around long enough to be able to do a lot of concrete research on this end and to be able to tell you exactly what the impact is in every category. But anecdotal evidence and just the stories that come out of the social enterprises and the research that has been done shows they really are making a significant difference. And they often meet, I think, as I mentioned, triple bottom lines. And so I'm just going to show you some examples. Actually, I'm going to have a sip of my water. That'll keep me going for 75,422 more words. So this is, when you look at the triple bottom line of social enterprises and you look at economic, environment, or social, you'll see that often they have kind of a primary goal, community issue that they want to deal with. And then they also have, almost as important, a secondary social goal that they want to meet. And they ultimately almost always end up meeting three. Now, this is just my own hypotheses that I've noticed and over time, and I certainly would beg to, for somebody to say that this isn't the case, but at the very minimum, they're meeting double bottom lines. But I think you'll find that this is a thing that often happens in the way that they work. So here's some examples of, some of the local social enterprises we have. So Community Forest International were started by a group of young people, and it began work in Tanzania. And it's a really interesting story. You guys need to Google this story and see the story of Jess Schnurr, who is a young high school graduate who is changing the world. He and others that are working with him now. But so they have been doing amazing work in Tanzania in helping to change their economy. They've moved that across the world. They do a lot of things. They're based out of Sackville, New Brunswick. And so they do some really interesting things. In the example I thought I would tell you about them tonight is there was an older man who left a farm to them with pristine Acadian forests on it and land that had always been farmed organically. And so it's going to be used as a demonstration site for ecology, but it needed repairs, and so they were looking at ways to capitalize what they needed to do in order to open this. And so what they did was they contracted with some large companies that needed carbon offsets. And so this company pays them to not cut down the Acadian forests. Now that's pretty smart, if you ask me. I want to get paid to do nothing. I tell Jeff this, like, have you got any more of these tricks up your sleeve? But what it's doing, of course, is saving the environment with our wonderful Acadian forests, and at the same time, it's generating the revenue that they need to help deliver their programs, other programs that they can't otherwise get funding for, and to renovate the ecology center. Entergreen. Entergreen is a worker cooperative. It's a builder's co-op. And they've designed a system in which the homes that they build are able to be heated on with about a reduced of 83% of the normal energy costs. So they have an environmental goal, but they also are a worker co-op and come from a small community where all the young people and skilled tradespeople were leaving to go out west and work in the tar sands. So what they were able to do was to create a worker co-op where everyone is paid exactly the same salary regardless of the work that they do. They have 30 people that work with them, and they're able to create these wonderfully energy efficient homes, and they received the Premier's Award, Environmental Award last year for the work that they do. Car share. Many of you have heard of car share in Halifax. So they're helping with environmental goals by reducing the number of vehicles that are on the road. They're helping in social ways with people being able to get around and have transportation that they might not otherwise be able to have because they don't have the money to pay for cars and insurance. Even seniors, there are a lot of examples of car share or ride share social enterprises that are happening. And isolated seniors are being given, rides so they can get to appointments. So again, they're helping to reduce isolation. They're helping people to have access to services. They are helping with environmental issues. They're a for-profit, and so this is a business that's operated by someone, but it's still, is meeting all of those triple bottom lines. Real Food Connections is another example of a for-profit business. It's out of Fredericton. And this very dynamic young man started a business, and what he's doing is he's set up a distribution system and trucks the food that's grown by local farms. And as you know, we've been losing a lot of our local farms, small farms, can't keep up. And so many of them, they grow crops, they didn't know if they could sell, they didn't have access to the market, and that was a big issue. So he has 125 small farms in New Brunswick that He has arrangements with, so he's able to distribute their food for them. He's just did an investment call and raised enough money to open a commercial kitchen, so now those farmers can package their food and sell them commercially, and so he's making a huge, and plus as customers, we're able to buy local, non-GMO, organic, locally grown food, which is something that's just a tremendous interest. And so this has been growing, and he's actually recently been recognized by the Premier, too, as one of the most dynamic young entrepreneurs in our region. Astor Group is an environmental consulting firm, and their purpose, their reason for existence is to address a number of climate change and environmental issues, one of which they're particularly focused on flooding, which is a huge problem. And I don't have time to talk this evening about sort of some of the emerging capitalization things that are happening, and I hope you do get a chance to learn a bit about those things through your session. But there are things that here in Nova Scotia and now emerging in the other provinces called Community Economic Development Investment Funds, which are ways for communities and individuals to invest in local community economic development and local businesses and keep the money in the region. I know in Nova Scotia, Dave, you might have better figures than I do, but it's in the vicinity of $700 million, and in New Brunswick about $600 million per year that go out of our provinces to the Toronto Stock Exchange. And if we could capture a small portion of that money and invest it in businesses here, I can tell you it would make a big difference. So there are some tools like the Community Economic Development Investment Fund that are emerging, and they are helping to capitalize some of these projects. But I also wanted to mention something that's emerging that are called social impact bonds. And it's kind of a pay-for-performance agreement with government. So if you can fix a problem that's costing government or the society a lot of money, they will pay you for that performance with a return on investment. And so investors put the money up front. And there are different examples of that happening, and I know David is heavily involved in moving that whole thing forward. But I just mention it because I think of it when I think of this group, Astor Group, because they're looking at the idea of striking a deal with the provincial government under a social impact bond, because they have some solutions to our flooding problem. So again, innovations and some innovative tools that are coming about that give us an opportunity to move these sorts of things forward in creative ways that haven't been available for that sector in the past. And then you have organizations where the social aspect of it is really what the primary goal is, but they also have economic and environmental impacts. And so Habitat for Humanity, now some of these organizations are charities. There are legal issues around the structure that needs to be looked at. In Nova Scotia, you have, without question, the best charity law lawyer in the country, Richard Bridge. And so we don't have any worries down here. We just call Richard when we have a legal question, and he can tell us exactly what's what. But I just mention that because there are a number of charities that run social enterprises, and there are special Canada Revenue Agency restrictions or considerations that they need to look at. But they've been able to do this very successfully, and there are great examples. So Habitat for Humanity, as some of you may know, builds housing for low-income families, but they pay for their houses, but they have it's a community initiative where people help build, and then they're financed in such a way that a low-income family is able to afford their own home when otherwise they wouldn't be able to. So that was almost all reliant on donations and volunteerism, until a few years ago when they started using the social enterprise model. and they opened the re-stores, and some of you may be familiar with them. I don't know all what communities have them, but there are buildings that are being torn down. There are companies, renovation companies, and many others that provide the used materials, building materials, and so on to these restores. And there's also appliances. There's just about anything that you could need in building. And they employ members from their target group, which are marginalized and vulnerable people, and to work in these stores. So they build skills for their target group, and they sell recycled materials, and they generate millions of dollars, which they now can then turn around and put back into their original mission, which was building of the homes. But very viable business, and it's been growing. Another organization, this is here in Halifax. Anybody here been to Mindful Mango before? Okay, good. Check it out, okay? Shameless plug, Mindless Mango. Wonderful example of a social enterprise in Halifax. It was started by an organization that serves people with intellectual disabilities. And there's a wonderful history to it, and there are other businesses connected to this. But just to say, it's a cafe that's in a government building and had a ready-made customer base. They employ a number of people with intellectual disabilities in the cafe and making the food and catering service. Same thing, they're building skills, reducing isolation, and running extremely viable and profitable business, which they're then able to turn back the profits back into their social goal. Changes is a place in Fredericton. It's a high-end secondhand clothing store and bridal salon that was started by the woman who used to run the emergency shelter in Fredericton. And so she employs people who have come basically directly from the street and have virtually no chance of gaining employment. And they work with them on all kinds of different levels. They help them with everything from education through to medical. They train them in retail and sales, and they help match them with employers. And again, a viable business that generates enough profit, again, to be able to turn it back around into doing more programs. Open Sky Cooperative. It's a residential organic farm in Sackville that has been set up for young adults with autism and other social barriers. And so they grow a variety of organic vegetables, and they have a training space, and they do all kinds of events, which they sell in the marketplace, and they raise enough money to help maintain this farm. And then the residents of the farm are, they learn about growing things organically and a lot of other skills, but they're also matched with local farmers. And again, one of the issues that we've been dealing with our local farms is trying to find people that want to work on them. So it's meeting the needs not only of the people that they're serving, but also the local community and the farms in local communities. Common Thread is an organization that takes recycled flags and banners. You know, all these conferences, and we've always got these banners, and you know, every fair day for every community's got the banners, and what happens to them, they often go to the landfill afterwards, and so they've taken these and set up an amazing company that sells these bags to conferences all over the place, and they employ immigrant women. I last count, they had 40 full-time people that were working, producing these bags and flags and other things. And last but not least on this sort of social end of things is Key Industries. That's in St. John, and they make all kinds of promotional products, and they have printing and copying shop. They have a huge amount of machines set up. They employ people with physical and intellectual disabilities. And they are able, as a result of the profits that they generate from this, to provide all their programs for 160 people. So, that's an expensive undertaking. They do all kinds of different programs. So again, just to give you a sense of what's possible when you're mixing social and business. And then just last, I just want to talk a bit about the more economic focused organizations that also have social and cultural goals. So I mentioned earlier CareForce. CareForce was a privately owned home care service that the owner was retiring, and this is another area where there's a lot of potential for social enterprises, is in succession planning. And so the business was going to close down, and I think there was, do you remember how many employees, David? 16 or something like that? 16 employees that were going to lose their jobs. And so they decided to take it over as a worker co-op. They've doubled their staff. Their staff are all owners. Now, these were primarily people that, home care workers don't get paid a lot of money. You know, they were probably making $10 an hour when they were working for the company owner, although I think she was a lovely person, but that's just the going rate. So what they've been able to do is build this so that those same workers are paid a much better salary. They have full benefit packages. They have ownership in the company. So they all have an equity position in the company. And so they're able to really improve the quality of life of the people that were working there. But they've also been able to expand their programs, and they do some tremendous work with people with Alzheimer's, and people who are often, sometimes these are the only folks that they see in the run of a day. So again, really, really interesting and economically viable business. Really Local Harvest is an organization that represents organics, small farmers. It runs a farmer's market and helps to sell all of their produce, and helps with a variety of other things. Acadia, you may recognize some of this. I don't know. What's the feelings between Acadia and MSVU? You guys like each other well? No competition? I hope not, because I'm using one of their examples down here. This is a little theater in Wolfville that was closed. The owner couldn't operate it any longer. It wasn't making enough money or whatever, and so it closed. But the community really wanted it. It was a main cultural venue for them, and so some people got together. They used one of these community economic development investment funds I mentioned earlier to raise money. Just Us Coffee, they approached them and they put in a little cafe, and they were able to revive that community, or that theater, so that it is just a cultural center of Wolfville now. And then just to say, there are some others down the side. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about them. The St. John Community Loan Fund has investors that put money into very high-risk loans for marginalized people. There have been a lot of people that have been able to start businesses as a result of the work that they do. They themselves are a social enterprise. They've invested in real estate and property, and so they're generating a lot of additional money through those means. The community business development corporations all across the country started out as social enterprises. And so I hope you all know about the CBDCs here. So they help small businesses with all kinds of technical support and other things, but most certainly with loans. And so they generate revenue from the interest off their loan so that they're able to continue to do their work, and they'll often finance businesses that you couldn't get financed from a bank. So there are a lot of real success stories all across the Maritimes for businesses that have used the CBDC. And then there are music festivals that are social enterprises that are set up for a cultural purpose, but they generate significant economic activity in communities. I know this about Nova Scotia because my friend who came with me today, she and I last summer did 6 music festivals in Nova Scotia in 6 weeks, and I spent a lot of money. So I know what a great service that, you know, a lot of these groups are providing. And so some of them tend to grow. There are things that grow out of it, although it might be a once-a-year festival. What we're seeing is that it's bringing people together, and a lot of other smaller businesses in the culture sector have come out of that. So I think I've just about run out of my 6,472 words, and just want to close this evening by not neglecting to mention our own organization, the Cooperative Enterprise Council of New Brunswick. We are a social enterprise. We get no funding from government, and so we have to provide services that allow us to deliver our programs. And so we do a lot of training, and we do a lot of events and contract work and so on to do that. But we're a small organization, but I think that one of the things about social enterprise is you don't got to be big to be mighty, that really some of the small social enterprises are making the biggest difference. And the Co-op Council has only been around for the last 7 years, and the impact has been tremendous. We've brought about new legislation and new programs. We've held dozens upon dozens of new co-ops and social enterprises to become established. They've created jobs all over the province. And, well, see, I said about technical. That's telling me I'm up, right? It's telling me that that's okay, that's good. So anyhow, just to say it is a wonderful organization. And the other that I wanted to mention is the Canadian Community Economic Development Network. Now, for things like co-op councils and social enterprise councils, look in your own province. There are lots out there that will provide you with support. And at a national level, the Canadian CED Network is definitely something you should be checking out. There are all kinds of resources available. And we hope that you all decide you want to become a social entrepreneur. And if you are going to do that in New Brunswick, you come see me. My name is out there, and we'll sign you up for the movement, okay? Thank you.